actually had to retrofit in the lab.
Sorry, have you seen Lynette?
I got trapped in the bug room.
Welcome to Future Fields.
Come on in.
Hello, and welcome to Dare to Be Different, the show where we spotlight founders who are rewriting the rules and reshaping entire industries. We are your hosts, Chris Young
And Lynette Tremblay.
Today, we're at Future Fields, where they make unmakeable proteins for drug companies. This episode is sponsored by M&P, a national firm focused on accounting, consulting, tax, and digital services in more than 160 communities across Canada. Their advisors deliver personalized strategies and made-in-Canada solutions to help businesses of all sizes reach their full potential.
Angelo is head of business development at M&P for their technology group, and he spotted Future Fields as a rising star early on.
I thought, wow, that is super cool. I can't believe a company like that is in Edmonton.
Yeah. And so chatting with Matt and Jalene, what was your first impression?
Super cool. Like there were obviously a couple entrepreneurs that had an idea, that had this cool technology that they want to commercialize, and they want to build it here in Edmonton. I thought that was very cool.
For centuries, humans have harnessed the power of biology, fermenting grains in a beer, cultivating yeast to bake bread, though we never called it biotechnology. Modern biotechnology as we know it truly emerged in the 1970s, when groundbreaking discoveries in recombinant DNA technology paved the way for manipulating genetic material to produce new medicines and therapies. By the early 1980s, the first genetically engineered insulin reached the market, marking a significant turning point that launched a new era of drug development, food innovation, and agricultural engineering. Over the decades, the biotech industry has grown from a nascent field into a global force. In 2022, the market reached an estimated $1.37 trillion in valuation, with forecasts predicting a compound annual growth rate of nearly 14% through 2030. This signals a continued demand for breakthroughs that can meet our world's complex health and sustainability challenges.
Just as those early scientists forever altered the landscape of medicine, Matt and Jalene at Future Fields carry that legacy forward into the next frontier of biotechnology, where earlier pioneers overcame scientific and technical barriers to prove that biology could be harnessed for unprecedented ends. Matt and Jalene are now pushing those boundaries in service of an even broader mission, and they're relying on tiny little fruit flies.
The things that we make, recombinant proteins, these have been manufactured for 50 years. It's how we make insulin, right? The insulin's been made this way for 50 years. It all revolves around genetically engineering an organism to produce a protein product. That gene makes the protein. What's been done for 50 years is doing this in a single cell system, and primarily 3 different cell types. There's E. coli, yeast, and mammalian cells. That's all they've used for 50 years. To do that, you need to grow them in these big, costly, complex steel tanks called bioreactors. They have very specified engineered growth conditions that can be very fragile. The growth periods are very long. Production cycles take a very long time. There's all kinds of limitations with the way they've been doing it. And it really hasn't changed in 50 years. Yes, there's been, some considerable improvements, but they've hit a ceiling, and that's because innovations beyond the biological system haven't happened. So when we set out to solve the problem in cellular agriculture around making these things cheaper, making it much more scalable, we knew it had to be a system that was just dramatically different, reimagining this whole process from scratch. And what we were really trying to do was think outside the tank, come up with a solution that didn't require this, the bioreactors, the really costly infrastructure. That's ultimately the big source of the problem. And so why fruit flies is, simple infrastructure. We don't require these bioreactors. They grow incredibly well. That's why you find them in your kitchen.
Yeah, they scale themselves.
Insect reproduction is unmatched. That's why insects dominate biomass over the world. If you weighed every insect in the world, it would be, way more than any other type of organism out there, because they're just so bloody good at making more of themselves. So we can leverage those types of advantages as a biomanufacturing platform.
What's cool about Matt and Jalene is how they founded Future Fields, combining this knowledge for physiology, anatomy of a fruit fly, and coming up with a product that doesn't exist and that's super cheap.
Yeah. And also listening to Matt talk, he definitely gives mad scientist vibes. And I mean, I don't understand most of what he says, but,
I don't
but
think
they're
anybody did.
incredibly successful. And it begs the question as to why did they start all this? What was the origin story, the impetus for this? I mean, I certainly was curious about that.
What drove us to want to start a company was not because we wanted to start a company, but just we were really excited about this new field. For me in particular, it was a way to use this like very niche skill set that I was developing in grad school and apply it to something that I really believed in that could have a tangible impact on the world, in my lifetime. And yeah, the company and the business model has evolved dramatically since then. But I think like the core of it is still there in that you could take biology and use it as a tool to solve some of the world's biggest problems, whether that is sustainability, food insecurity, curing diseases, coming up with new bioinnovations. At the end of the day, that's what's stayed true throughout the entire development of the company, regardless of how the business model has changed. And that's, ultimately, I think what drives us, what drove us to start the company, what continues to drive us today.
Yeah, it was very much just wanting to be involved, wanting to find a way to be part of this industry and contribute through our technology. It was never, we didn't sit down in a boardroom and think of a bunch of business ideas and pick the best one. Things just kept working out, and an idea would work, an opportunity would come up, and it would work out, and it just was very slow progression the first couple of years.
And that's what's interesting about it is I think like the approach we took of like focusing on the impact first and then figuring out how to monetize it, turn it into a business model, it led to, I think, a lot slower growth at the start, but I think it's also a more sustainable approach to building the business, and that I think there's going to be more long-term success that way. But yeah, I think it's very, very different from, how a lot of traditional startups start, where it's, built around solving a problem in the market versus solving like a big grandiose problem in the world, right? That how do you, and then figuring out how to turn that into a viable business. So
yeah, I think when we started, we were doing exactly what they teach you not to do in startup school, which is a solution without a problem.
Yeah.
But then we found the problem and tailored the solution, and then things really started to come together.
A few years ago, the once soaring market for alternative meat products hit a significant downturn. After skyrocketing enthusiasm in the late 2010s, fueled by companies like Beyond Meat, consumer confidence and investor sentiment began to wane. What was once heralded as the future of food, the alternative meat product industry found itself struggling to meet the demands of a more skeptical market. For companies reliant on the growth of alternative proteins, including Future Fields, the industry-wide recalibration presented a clear signal to evolve their offerings.
In response to this, Matt and Jalene and Future Fields made a strategic pivot, shifting their focus to ensure their cutting-edge biotechnology could continue contributing meaningfully across a broader spectrum of applications.
Yeah, our solution to the problem in cultured meat was very straightforward, and that was the solution. And as we had to venture outside of that, it took a while. Fortunately, our tech, because it's a platform, it can be applied to a lot of different markets, and proteins are used in a lot of different segments. So it was almost the opposite problem of having too many options and then figuring out where's the problem that we can solve. And it, like I said, it's been like a good, 2-year journey of venturing out of cultured meat to finding, the applications that were best suited to go after. And
it did take some time, I think, for us to actually, have a physical product that we felt comfortable launching, that we knew was safe and effective and would do what we said it did. And so once we got to that point and we actually had something, to put into the market and to start testing, and then finally having feedback and conversations with customers, that's when we really started to I think, tailor our understanding of the value proposition. But it took some time to get there, because you can only learn so much from hypothetical conversations and research. You really need to have something out there to be able to interact with customers. And yeah, so once we finally had that, then that just allowed us to learn so much more and to continue to tailor things based on that feedback.
Jalene talked about how they did things maybe the opposite of what they teach in startup school.
Yeah.
Where she said, they did a solution without, or a solution without a problem, and then they found the problem. But realistically, that's in biotechnology what you'd have to do, because they needed to create the product to be able to figure out if it solved a problem, and then they could adapt it. But even still, we asked them, if you could have gone back, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah. Well, I think we could have been much faster if we would have. Well, I don't know though. Would we?
I mean,
so many things just worked out. Yeah, it's hard to
well,
say.
and it's just, I think, with first-time founders, it's just like, how fast can you learn and how fast can you adapt? That's what it's really about. And I think that's one thing I think we've done pretty well. But yeah, it's like hindsight's 2020. And yeah, there's things that we could have done differently and could have, come to these realizations faster if we had that kind of wisdom.
Experience,
but it's also learned wisdom that you have to kind of go through first.
So what's really cool about Future Fields is that all of their development process, their manufacturing process, all their equipment, all their staff, they're located in Edmonton. So when we got to go to their head office, we also got to visit and get a tour of their lab and all of the ways that they're building this cool protein. I think you had a lot of fun in the lab.
I did have some fun. I guess fun might not be the word I'd use, spending time in a room full of bugs but it was fascinating. And the fact, like you said, the fact that they have their entire operations here in biotechnology is fairly unique. I know a lot of biotech companies that do have larger operations down in the United States. And so it's great to see them expanding here as well.
Yeah. And Matt talked about the expansion project that they have going on just actually behind the same building. So they're going to be in the same spot, which is cool for the staff.
What's in that room there?
So this is our makeshift temporary fly room. So so this is what we're using right now, but while we're waiting for our facility to be built. And this is a very classic, scrappy startup sort of setup where we're doing all this stuff in the lab because we just don't have the space otherwise, and we're getting access to it. But right now, this is what we've done. And it's actually remarkably sophisticated and really well designed by our team, our engineers. I mean, it's quite literally insulation panels that are taped together with duct tape. It works amazing. And I mean, there's temperature control in there. There's full environmental control in this little makeshift room that creates the environment we need to grow our insects.
Okay.
So once the facility is built, we'll be able to do this at a much bigger scale without the duct tape.
What makes Future Fields different? I mean, aside from the fact that nobody is using like genetically engineered fruit flies, but what is it about? Is it the product? What's really different about you?
Yeah, so it's our manufacturing process that makes us unique. The way recombinant proteins are traditionally produced is in single cell systems grown in big bioreactors, and they've been doing that for 50 years. And so what we wanted to do was develop a manufacturing process that, ultimately circumvents the limitations with traditional systems. And to do that, we wanted something that had more optionality in the protein production machinery, which all comes down to the cell. In a single cell system, you have one set of tools to make that protein. That one cell it's packaged with these tools for making proteins, right? Biological tools. Now all those cells are going to have the same toolkit, right? So what we've done is we've gone to a multicellular approach, a whole organism. So we have 200 unique distinct cell types in a whole fruit fly. Each one of those 200 distinct cell types has its own toolkit for making proteins. So that increase in optionality allows us to make more complex proteins that traditional systems struggle with. And so because of that, it unlocks production of things that are otherwise unmakeable. And that's a huge problem in the industry. So by reimagining the whole manufacturing process, we're unlocking, all this opportunity in, pharma, in life sciences, in agri-tech, in all these segments that rely on proteins that they don't have access to otherwise.
So just listening to Matt explain what they do, like I became wrapped up into just how cool the product they're producing. Very unique, definitely a science nerd putting all that together. And that's one of the things that makes Future Fields very unique and very cool in the market.
But also just being there in the office and feeling the team culture and everything else. That's what makes a company great, because there are lots of companies out there with great products, great offerings, but they are not considered great companies. So I think what made both of us want to put an application in was the team culture. Let's talk more about the culture, because that's a big part of what you do as COO. How do you foster a dare to be different culture at Future Fields? We've talked to some of your team and they say they love it here. So what is that all about?
Yeah, I think there's a few different elements to that. Definitely one big part is just that we are first-time founders. When we came into this, we didn't really have any preconceived notions of how to do things or how to do things right. And transparently, we both even had pretty limited previous work experience. I had only worked at 2 other places prior to founding the company, and Matt was a professional grad student for a decade. So I think we didn't have a lot of these ideas coming in. We just figured things out as they came along and thought, what's going to work for the company at this stage? Our values we have been very clear about from early on. That's one of the first things, even when we were way too early, I think probably even before we had employees. We set what we wanted the values of the company to be. And we have evolved those, since the early days, but those have really been foundational in how we operate. We come back to them frequently. We work on things like operationalizing them. What does it actually look like within the company? And so I think some of those that have really contributed to the culture, obviously acting on the climate crisis, that's our number one value. And there's a lot of, everything really, from the way the company's structured to how we operate, the things we focus on, comes from that. And I think that's also what has drawn a lot of people to the company. And even though the focus of the markets and some of the direction has changed, that particular value has not shifted. We've been able to maintain just how important that is to the company. We're really big on transparency, so we try whenever possible. We're at the point now where we don't necessarily have the opportunity to consult every single person on every single decision, but we try to be really open about why decisions were made, the rationale for things, just making it clear that we're not making these decisions just based on personal preference a lot of the time, like trying to be open about that, the company situation. We have things like the ability for anyone to ask an anonymous question of the CEO at a team meeting. We try to be open about financials as much as possible, so that's a big part of it.
Jalene brought up something that I think a lot of companies either hesitate or they have trouble with, this idea of financial transparency, letting everybody know, what's the pay grade or pay grid, who's making what. What's been your experience in companies either trying to implement that or refusing to implement, financial transparency?
I've worked with companies that have it and that don't, and it's a big difference maker in culture and trust in the organization. And I find that when you're honest with the team, not just about say pay scales, but also earnings, it makes decisions a lot easier and people a lot more committed. And I think that's what we saw at Future Fields.
Yep.
And you've talked to me about your team. I love hearing you talk about your team. You actually said that they make magic happen. Yes. I say as we stand in front of this,
yeah,
this what looks like magic to a non-scientist.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that and how you foster that. What does that look like at Future Fields?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing we learned early on is that having only subject matter experts focus on just their subject and be the only contributors to developments in that area doesn't work well. I won't say it doesn't work well, but there's a bigger opportunity if we're getting people from across the company to collaborate and contribute. Some of the very best ideas in this company have come from conversations between, somebody who has a background in materials engineering and a biologist, and someone who has no scientific background, maybe someone from a commercial kitchen background, and they're brainstorming and thinking about these problems. And I really think that is one of the reasons we've been able to come up with some of our best ideas. I mean, even if you go back to the earliest iterations of the company, when we first came up with the idea for using fruit flies, I think that it is because I did not understand the limitations of science, and I just thought, oh, why don't we mash these two ideas together? And that's really what put the bug in Matt's ear and kind of let him have that first spark of the idea. But that has really stayed with the company, and I think people feel safe enough and comfortable enough in our meetings and conversations to be able to ask questions and bring up ideas, and we have really productive and healthy debate between team members, and people feel safe to be able to do that. So I think that's a huge reason why we've been able to just think about things differently and come up with very out-of-the-box solutions to problems.
So I sat down with Paige Grant, now a research scientist who started with Future Fields as an intern. Jalene was mentioning something about collaborative problem solving. Like, groups of people tend to take on problems, and some of the best ideas have actually come from non-subject matter experts.
Yeah, definitely. So even just today, I was telling someone else on the team about how I had a really long day last week because I was trying to do something that was new that I hadn't done before, and it didn't go the way that I was expecting. And they were like, oh, but I can make a solution for that. That type of thing happens all the time. Like, I sit across from an engineering team. They don't really have a biology background. They will come up with ideas like that just I would never think of, not having an engineering background. And so it's very interesting to see the process of how they think differently than how I think, and how they problem solve differently. And so approaching problems from those different angles, I feel like always leads to a better solution than just one perspective.
Back in the lab, Matt was more than keen to walk us through how the whole process worked. He's such a tech nerd when it comes to this.
One of the advantages that we have also with our system is we can store our starting material, our biomass, for weeks or months at a time by freezing it. That's not something you can do with traditional systems. This is how we store them right now. So we literally, we harvest the larvae, and we can throw them in these freezer bags. They're all labeled according to the product, the genetic strain, when it was harvested, all those details. So this is what we can use to start. And again, that's unique in the industry, and it's actually a big advantage. So when we go to manufacture, if an order comes in, this is what gives us the ability to also manufacture on demand.
So those come from the fly room?
Yeah. So yeah, these would have been here. So these were harvested, yesterday. So
they're fresh.
Yeah, pretty fresh. Yeah.
And then what happens to them after?
So we would take these, we would take as much biomass as we need to fulfill the order, and that's all, calculated based on the metrics that we're collecting as we're, making the flies. But let's say we take that biomass, we then thaw it, we add some buffer, which is salty water, basically having different, things in the buffer that support the protein of interest that we're going to extract. Mm-hmm. So you kind of make this mixture of larvae and buffer. Mm-hmm. We then run it through our processing machine, which basically just mechanically homogenizes it. It grinds it up. And so what comes out of that is two things. You get kind of the more solid stuff, which looks like hummus.
Ooh, hummus. Hey, you guys want some hummus?
And then out the other side, which is more of the liquid portion, comes out kind of looking a little bit like chocolate milk.
Ooh, chocolate milk. Chocolate milk. Haven't had chocolate milk in a long time. Where are you guys going? What's going on? Where are you going?
I love that you ate hummus at Future Fields. I think that's an experience the staff's never going to forget. I was thinking they probably are turned off of hummus and chocolate milk for life.
Already, but the fact that I did bring it in was horrible.
Yes. Even just watching that whole segment, my stomach's turning.
One of the things that's, I would say, unique about the dynamics of the of both Matt and Jalene is that they're married.
Yeah.
And this is a bit dicey sometimes when you have a married couple running, a company, and especially during the growth stages, there's always back and forth, but just sitting there, you can tell that their skills really complement each other.
They do. Yeah, they have very different skill sets, and their skill sets fit their roles really well. You mentioned Matt has some big ideas as the CEO. So what's that process look like?
Yeah.
I think the word you used was insane.
Yeah, well, it's because they seemed insane at the time. Like, some of the metrics that he'll bring up as wanting us to hit, or we'll see something in a pitch and be like, excuse me, like that's the goal. Yeah, you want to run that by the team, but so far every time we have actually been able to blow those goals out of the water, and I feel like it's just it's this interesting mix of now Matt being far enough removed from the day-to-day that I think he often has his head in the clouds in a very helpful way for a CEO. Like he can see where he wants the company to go, and he has these very big goals, and he's not afraid to voice them and let the team know, and everyone just comes together and so far has been able to make it happen. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
What is next for Future Fields?
In one word is scaling. We're a manufacturing company, which means, our physical presence needs to scale as the company grows. So we're at a point right now where we're ready to scale. We've got the infrastructure in place. Our pilot facility is literally being built as we speak.
Month or so away from being ready to go.
We're expecting to be operational in there by January.
And that's the construction happening on?
Yeah, and that's going to give us a lot more capacity to scale our actual capacity in manufacturing, but also increase our stringency in manufacturing, and that's going to unlock new opportunities in the market so we can go after our markets that do require that additional stringency, higher quality, and that's something we're really
pretty
excited about.
Constrained by the level of formal quality program we can implement in a facility like this, just due to our size, and there's not enough rooms to kind of separate things out in an ideal scenario. So once we move out to the new facility, that will allow us to unlock much higher grades of quality and get some real quality certifications, that sort of thing, which will be a huge boon to some new markets.
Right.
And with that comes growing the team too. We need more people. We want to continue to grow our team. So we'll be expecting to probably double in size over the next 18 months or so.
It takes a community to help grow a company. So we asked Angelo from MNP, how do you see MNP supporting this next stage for Future Fields as they're really launching?
Yeah, and so the great thing about MNP is, we support companies as early as ideation all the way to an exit. And different stages of entrepreneurship demands different type of expertise, and usually we've structured our practice to a point where we would have the expertise at every stage. And so I think Future Fields is in a great position. To your point, it's an inflection point. They're ready to take that next level, whatever that might be, expansion internationally, whatever that is. We have the great thing about our firm is we would have the expertise in-house that can hopefully help them.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dare to Be Different, sponsored by MNP. We hope you enjoyed hearing about the Future Field story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this episode.
And the next time you have a crazy idea, don't ask why, ask yourself, why not?
Hello, and welcome to Dare to Be Different, the show where we spotlight founders who are rewriting the rules and reshaping entire industries. We are your hosts, Chris Young
and Lynette Tremblay. And on today's episode, we're taking you on a journey inside the walls of Pulse Medica.